The slap didn't sound loud at first. It sounded like a joke landing wrong, like skin meeting skin in a room full of clinking plates and casual laughter. But the moment it happened, the air in the diner changed. People didn't scream. They did something more telling. They looked away. Because in towns like Hollow Creek, you didn't stare at the sheriff when he decided to remind someone who had power. You didn't question him. You didn't even breathe too boldly. You just watched a black waitress swallow humiliation like it was part of the job and prayed you weren't next. Sheriff Wade Harlan thought that silence meant permission. He thought his badge made him untouchable. He didn't know 2 federal agents were sitting 3 booths back, watching every move, recording every second, and waiting for exactly this kind of moment to prove what the town had been whispering for years. And when the waitress didn't fall apart, when she steadied herself and kept moving like the slap wasn't the whole story, that's when the agents knew they had enough to end him. Maribel Mari Jackson had worked at Rosie's Diner since she was 19. Now she was 28, black, with a calm face and tired eyes, and the kind of steady posture you learn when life has taught you that reacting loudly gets you labeled. Rosie's was the heart of Hollow Creek. Red vinyl booths, a counter with spinning stools, coffee that tasted like it had been on the burner since yesterday, and a chalkboard menu that never changed. The town called it friendly. Marie knew better. It was friendly if you fit. If you didn't, it was the kind of place where people smiled at you while keeping you in your place. Marie kept working anyway because the diner paid her bills, because her mother needed medication, because her younger cousin lived with her since his mom disappeared, and because jobs that hired black women in Hollow Creek came with conditions: quiet gratitude, no attitude, don't make trouble. Marie had learned to move through the diner like water. Efficient, polite, unnoticeable when people wanted her invisible. Present when they wanted service. She didn't love it, but she was good at it. And being good was sometimes the only protection you had. Sheriff Wade Harlan was a regular. Not because he liked pancakes, because he liked being seen. He was white, mid-50s, heavy-set in the way men get when no one tells them no, with a face that could smile in church and threaten you in private. His uniform was always crisp. His badge always caught the light. He came in with deputies sometimes, sat in the same booth by the window, and talked loudly so everyone could hear. People laughed at his jokes, even when they weren't funny. People waved when he walked in like he was a celebrity. And Marie did what she always did. Served him, kept her eyes down, didn't give him anything to grab onto. Because Wade Harlan liked to grab onto things. Not just physically, socially. He liked to test boundaries. He liked to see who would flinch. That morning, Rosie's was crowded. A couple truckers near the counter, a family with kids spilling syrup, 2 older women gossiping in the corner, and Wade Harlan in his usual booth with 2 deputies, both white, younger, laughing too hard. Marie had already been verbally poked at twice by the sheriff before 9 a.m. Little comments about her smile, about how she should lighten up, about how she was too pretty to look so serious. Comments designed to remind her he could talk to her however he wanted. Marie kept it neutral. Refill? Anything else? Have a good day? She worked the room. Then the sheriff decided he wanted entertainment. Marie approached his booth with a pot of coffee. She leaned slightly to pour into his mug. Wade shifted his chair just enough to crowd her space and said loud, "Careful now, don't spill that on my uniform." His deputies chuckled. Marie didn't react. She poured carefully. Wade leaned back and looked her up and down like she was an object on a shelf. "You ever smile?" he asked. Marie kept her voice even. "What else can I get you, Sheriff?" Wade's smile sharpened. "A smile," he said, like it was a demand disguised as flirtation. One deputy laughed. The other said, "Come on, Marie. Sheriff's asking nice." Marie's jaw tightened, but she kept her face neutral. "I'll get you anything on the menu," she said. Wade's eyes narrowed. "Don't get smart with me," he said quietly, but the quiet carried threat. Mari turned slightly to step away, and her elbow brushed his empty plate. It barely moved. No spill, no damage. But Wade seized the moment like he'd been waiting. "Hey!" he barked, sudden and loud. "Watch it!" Mari froze and turned back. "I'm sorry," she said automatically, because apologizing was armor. Wade stood up fast, towering over her. "Sorry?" he repeated, voice rising. "You clumsy?" Mari's heart hammered. She glanced around. The diner had gone quieter. People were listening without looking like they were listening. Mari kept her hands visible. "It was an accident," she said softly. Wade's face twisted into a grin that wasn't friendly. "Accident," he repeated. Then, in one sharp motion, he slapped her across the face. Not a punch, not a brawl, a slap. The kind meant to humiliate, not injure. The kind meant to be dismissed as nothing if she complained. The sound cut through the diner like a snapped rope. Mari's head turned slightly with the force. Her cheek burned. For a second, her vision blurred. Not from pain, from shock. The room froze. One of the kids at the family table stopped chewing. A fork clinked against a plate. Somebody near the counter muttered, "Damn!" But no one stood up. No one shouted. No one rushed to her side. Because it was the sheriff. Because in Hollow Creek, the sheriff was the law, and the law didn't like being challenged. Wade looked at Mari like he expected her to cry, to yell, to beg. He expected her to give him a scene he could punish. Mari didn't. She stood very still and breathed. She tasted metal in her mouth, where her teeth had nicked her inner lip. She lifted her eyes slowly, not in defiance, in control. "Are you finished?" she asked quietly. Wade blinked, surprised. "What did you say?" he demanded. Mari's voice stayed calm. "Are you finished?" she repeated. The deputies looked uncomfortable now. Wade's jaw tightened. "Get me another coffee," he snapped, "and learn respect." Mari nodded once, slow, and turned toward the kitchen, walking like her legs weren't shaking. In the far back booth, two men who looked like ordinary travelers lowered their gaze from the menu at the same time. One was black, early 40s, wearing a plain jacket and a baseball cap. The other was white, late 30s, with tired eyes and a flannel shirt. They had been in that diner for 40 minutes, sipping coffee, saying very little, blending in. To the town, they were nobodies. To the sheriff, they were invisible. To each other, they were partners, federal agents, not in suits, not with badges visible. Undercover. Their names were Agent Marcus Reed and Agent Nolan Price, and they were there because Hollow Creek had become a quiet problem on a long list. Civil rights complaints, missing evidence, intimidation reports, a pattern of accidents that always seemed to happen to the same kinds of people. The state had ignored it for years. The feds hadn't. They'd been building a case slowly because the sheriff was careful. He didn't do illegal things on paper. He did them through fear, through whispers, through misunderstandings. Hard to prosecute without proof. Hard to prosecute until someone like Mari got slapped in public while a hidden microphone and camera were recording. Agent Reed's hand moved subtly under the table, pressing a small button on a device that looked like a key fob. Agent Price's eyes stayed on Wade Harlan, tracking his posture, his breathing, the way he returned to his booth like nothing happened. Reed's jaw tightened, controlled. He didn't rush to confront. Undercover work required patience. Emotion got people killed. But inside him, something hardened. They had enough, not just for assault, for abuse of authority, for intimidation in public, for a pattern. Price leaned slightly and murmured, barely moving his lips, "That's our moment." Reed nodded once. "And she's our witness," Reed whispered back. Mari reached the kitchen and gripped the counter with trembling fingers. Rosie, the owner, An older white woman with a beehive hairstyle and a tired face looked up. She had seen it. Everyone had. Her mouth opened, then closed. Fear fought decency in her eyes. "Marie," she started. Marie's voice was low, controlled. "Don't," she said. "Just let me work." Rosie swallowed hard. "You want me to call someone?" Rosie asked, voice shaking. Marie's eyes met hers. "Who?" she asked softly. Rosie had no answer. That's when Marie felt it, the loneliness of being harmed in public and still being alone. She took a deep breath, wiped her cheek with the back of her hand, and picked up a fresh pot of coffee. She walked back out because if she hid, he would win twice. She approached the booth, poured coffee without spilling a drop, and set the pot down. Wade didn't even look at her. He laughed with his deputies like he'd just swatted a fly. Agent Reed watched Marie's composure with a mix of respect and anger. Price watched the deputies. One looked uneasy, the other forced laughter, like loyalty was a survival tactic. Reed's eyes flicked to the diner's security camera in the corner. Old. Probably not working. Or not working when needed. That's how towns like this stayed clean on record. But Reed didn't need Rosie's camera. He had his own. 5 minutes passed. Wade finished his coffee. He stood, tossed cash on the table like a performance, and said loudly, "Keep the change, sweetheart. Maybe you can buy some manners." His deputies laughed again, weaker now. Wade strode toward the door, confident, unbothered, like consequences didn't exist in his world. As he stepped outside, Agent Reed stood too. He didn't rush. He moved casually, like a man heading to the restroom. Price followed, leaving a few dollars on the table. They exited a moment after Wade, timing controlled. Outside, the parking lot was bright with late morning sun. Wade headed toward his patrol SUV. His deputies followed. Agent Reed walked toward them from the side, posture calm, hands visible. Price moved to flank. Wade turned, annoyed. "What?" he snapped. Reed's voice was calm. "Sheriff Harlan?" Wade's eyes narrowed. "Yeah," he said. "Who are you?" Reed pulled out a badge. Not a sheriff's badge. A federal credential. He held it up just long enough for Wade to see, then lowered it. Wade's face changed fast. Surprise, then anger, then calculation. "What's this about?" Wade demanded. Agent Price spoke quietly. "About what you just did," he said. Wade scoffed. "I disciplined an employee who disrespected me," he snapped. Reed's eyes were ice. "You assaulted a civilian," Reed said. "On camera, in a public place." Wade's jaw tightened. "That girl's always been mouthy," he spat. Reed didn't blink. "We're not here to debate her personality," Reed said. "We're here to document your conduct." Wade's hand moved slightly toward his belt. Instinct. Price's hand lifted subtly, warning. "Don't," Price said quietly. Wade froze, realizing he was suddenly outnumbered by authority he couldn't intimidate. Reed continued, "We need you to come with us." Wade laughed, but it sounded strained. "You can't—" Reed cut him off. "We can," he said. "And we are." Wade's deputies looked panicked. One tried to step forward. "Sheriff!" Reed snapped his gaze toward them. "Step back," he ordered. They froze. Wade's face flushed red. "This is ridiculous," he hissed. "I run this county." Reed's voice stayed calm. "Not today," he said. Inside the diner, Mari watched through the window, heart pounding. She saw the sheriff's posture change. Less swagger, more fear. She didn't cheer. She didn't smile. She just felt something loosen in her chest. The sense that maybe, for once, the town wouldn't swallow the truth. Rosie stepped beside her, trembling. "Mari," Rosie whispered. "What's happening?" Mari swallowed. "They saw it," she said quietly. "Someone finally saw it." The agents didn't cuff Wade in the parking lot like a spectacle. They didn't need to. They escorted him to a vehicle, spoke in low professional tones, and radioed for a marked unit from a neighboring jurisdiction to meet them, to avoid Wade's deputies interfering. Wade tried to call someone. Reed took the phone as evidence. Wade shouted about jurisdiction. Reed ignored him. Price read him his rights. Wade's voice cracked with rage and disbelief. He had spent years being the consequence. Now he was facing one. When the marked unit arrived, Wade's deputies looked like they might faint. One whispered, "We're done." The other stared at the ground, realizing loyalty to a bully was about to cost him. Wade was taken away, not by his own, but by outsiders. That detail mattered. In Hollow Creek, the sheriff had always been the highest peak of power. Watching him leave in someone else's custody felt like watching gravity change. The next part was harder, because arresting a sheriff is dramatic. Building a case that holds is slow, and that's where Mari came in. Agent Reed returned to the diner after Wade was removed. He didn't swagger. He didn't act like a savior. He approached Mari carefully, respectful. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "I'm Agent Reed. I'm sorry for what happened." Mari's cheek still burned. She held his gaze, wary. "You saw it," she said. Reed nodded. "We recorded it," he said. Mari exhaled, shaky. "Good," she whispered. Reed continued, "We're building a larger case. We've had complaints for years. What happened today helps." Mari's eyes hardened. "Helps who?" she asked. Reed didn't flinch. "Helps you," he said. "Helps the next person. Helps the town." Mari's voice was low. "The town watched," she said, "and did nothing." Reed nodded. "That's why we're here," he replied. Then he asked gently, "Will you give a statement?" Mari hesitated. Fear rose. Fear of retaliation. Fear of being labeled. Fear of what the sheriff's friends might do even if he was arrested. Reed seemed to read it. "We can protect you," he said. "We can relocate you if needed. But I won't lie to you. Speaking up is brave, and it has risk." Mari swallowed. "I've been living with risk," she said quietly. Reed nodded. "Then you understand why proof matters," he replied. Mari gave the statement. She described the harassment, comments, intimidation, threats, going back months. She described how other waitresses avoided serving Wade because he touched them accidentally and laughed. She described how complaints went nowhere because the sheriff's office investigated itself. She described fear, and she described the slap in detail. The agents recorded it all. Rosie, shaking, also gave a statement. Two customers did too. One trucker, who had seen enough and decided he was tired of pretending, and an older woman who whispered, "He did this to my nephew once." The wall of silence cracked, not because the town suddenly became brave, but because someone in power finally made bravery feel less futile. Over the next weeks, the story unfolded like a storm. The feds executed a search warrant on the sheriff's office. They seized computers, body cam storage, evidence lockers. They found missing files. They found altered reports. They found a pattern of intimidation tied to traffic stops and random checks that always seemed to target black residents and poor white residents without connections. Wade Harlan's name appeared on too many questionable incidents to write off as bad luck. Deputies started flipping, quietly at first. One admitted they were instructed to lean hard on certain families. Another described evidence misplaced when it benefited the sheriff. The slap at Rosie's diner became the clean, undeniable public moment that made the rest of the case believable to outsiders. Mari's life changed, not instantly into something perfect, but into something different. She stopped walking with her head down. She still had fear, but it was mixed with something she hadn't felt in a long time. Possibility. The diner felt quieter. Some customers avoided her now, resentful that she had caused trouble. Others tipped her more, ashamed of what they'd witnessed. Rosie offered her paid time off, something Rosie had never offered anyone, because guilt finally had a price. Mari took it, Not because she needed rest, she did, but because she needed space to breathe without feeling watched. 1 month later, the federal case went public. Wade Harlan was indicted on civil rights violations, assault, abuse of authority, and obstruction-related charges connected to broader misconduct. The headline that hit regional news wasn't about years of quiet harm. It was about the slap. A sheriff caught on camera. A black waitress standing still, refusing to crumble. Federal agents watching. The town's untouchable man suddenly touchable. Mari watched the news from her small apartment with her cousin on the couch beside her. Her cousin, 16 and angry at the world, whispered, "They finally got him." Mari nodded slowly. "They finally saw him," she replied. The good ending in stories like this isn't that a powerful man falls. It's that the people he tried to keep small refused to stay small long enough for the truth to be documented. Mari didn't fight the sheriff with fists or screaming. She fought him with composure, with survival instincts, with the quiet decision not to disappear. And when the feds stood up, they didn't just arrest a man. They validated what the town had been forced to pretend wasn't happening, because silence protects abusers. And the moment the slap landed, the silence started dying. Slowly, painfully, but dying. And for the first time in Hollow Creek, the sheriff's badge didn't scare people more than the truth did.